welcome back to the Beat the Odds of Business and Wealth podcast.
Man, glad to be here. You know, we had a successful boot camp this last weekend. Everything went really well. I think everyone, received the information very well. And, today we're kind of continuing on the same theme. We're trying to save people, get them on the life raft.
And get them on the life raft.
Yeah.
Not everyone's going to get on, but there's more spaces than people think, right?
Yeah.
So, it was a fantastic boot camp. Like, just fantastic. Like 100, we always pick the 130, and like the quality of people that shows up to these things now, it's shocking, right? Because you always get the people in the comments like, when you bring in the boot camp to Saskatoon or GTA, and it's like I told the people at the boot camp, it's like, if the more and more popular I get, the more and more inclined I am to move it to Yellowknife, just to see who's actually serious about showing up, because it's there's only so many spots on the life raft, and what we're saying here is get rich for sure, not get rich easy.
That's right.
And so we just got to know who's really committed to the process. So
That's
today
right.
is a super, super important episode because we are a country without a budget.
A country without a budget. Yeah, this is interesting. When we got this new prime minister who was installed, voted in, just a month ago, a couple of months ago. And then now, doing a very, uncommon thing is not having a budget. I'm like, budgets, we don't need no stinking budgets. Like, what's going on here?
This is one of those things that is, I don't want to say designed, but it's likely to knock people off their path, right? Mm-hmm. And so this is important. I'm going to go deep through this. This is why we're going a little later today, because I want to be prepared for this one. We're going to go deep through it and actually figure out like what the significance is, what the budget means, what that means in the global context. What is the level of crazy compared to the other crazy things that's happening, and what you should do about it. What does this mean for your financial strategy for your household, right?
That's right. So let's strap in, folks, and get ready. This is going to be a good one. There's going to be a lot of meat and potatoes in this one. So yeah, let's get ready. Where are we starting?
Let's start with the actual announcement.
Okay.
So let's start with the finance minister actually saying like what exactly it is. So
all right, let's do it.
The first thing you do is the first step of this government is a middle class tax cut. That's the first thing. You start with that. Then you say, well, you need to have a throne speech to say what are the priorities of the government. And once you've done that, then you do an economic statement, which is going to be the fall economic statement.
The last time Canada didn't present a spring budget was 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Prior to that, 2002, due to the firing or resignation, depending on who you ask, of then Finance Minister Paul Martin in the spring. Champagne did not offer reasoning on why there will be no spring budget, only that there would be a fall economic statement. Reporters reminded the minister that the previous fall economic statement did not arrive until December 16th.
Fall is fall, I could not be clearer than that. Fall is fall. So fall 2025.
So last year fall was December.
Former parliamentary budget officer Kevin Page speculated in January that Canada may not have a spring budget this year due to an election. In an email to City News, Page says Parliament should get some kind of updated economic and fiscal outlook before the summer, but adding that it's reasonable to wait until the fall to get a budget or statement with measures in it. In a statement, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says, in part, Canadians were told that Mark Carney, the supposed serious economist, would bring competence and clarity. Instead, we're getting delays and dysfunction.
Taxpayers
Okay, so that's the announcement. That's what they said. Okay, I think it's actually very important for people to understand. Mm-hmm. If they're going to judge the significance of this, they have to understand the plumbing of this whole arrangement. What does the budget mean in the greater scheme of things? So, let's go through exactly what it means, like how the process is supposed to happen.
Okay, so let's do it.
What is supposed to happen is before April 1st of every year. So we're already late. We're already late. We were late before this actually happened. But you're supposed to release a budget prior to April 1st. And ideally, we're talking February, early March, right? From there, what happens is there's an estimate of spending. It's called a main estimate of spending. And then there's an interim supply vote that basically approves 1/4 of the annual spending. 1/4 of the annual spending, okay? From there, what happens is you get a series of supplemental estimates. So you then normally get a supplemental estimate A, that generally happens May or June, okay? And after that supplementary estimate A, you get a full supply bill normally before July 1st. And then basically that's approving the remainder of the spending that theoretically should be in the budget. But the budget is somewhat, it's very functional, but it's somewhat symbolic because it doesn't authorize the spending. It just lays out, should you vote for the supply bill to authorize the spending? Without the budget, how would you know if it's reasonable or not, right?
Sure.
And so that full supply bill is normally by July 1st, okay? And then let's go through like what actually else happens too. Then there's normally supposed to be a statement of public accounts for the prior year, because keep in mind the fiscal year for Canada is March 31st. So it's April 1st, starts on April Fool's Day, and goes to March 31st, okay? And so basically you're supposed to get your statement of public accounts by November 1st. And I just hate that that's November 1st. Like if you're a private company, you get 6 months, but the government is supposed to get 7 months. Why? Why are you so special? Like they should be quicker at it, you would think, but that's what it is. Okay. After that public accounts, which is basically the financial statement for the preceding year, now you get a fall economic update for the current year. Okay. That would normally happen prior to January 1st. And just going back to the public statement of accounts, that's the one that, Christy Freeland dropped off, where she resigned, and then the Liberals basically dropped off that, akin to how, someone would drop off an illegitimate child at the fire department, right?
Yes.
That's the one that just landed and started the whole, chaos with the government falling and Trudeau resigning and the whole bit, right?
And we haven't really had a sitting parliament since then. Roughly around that time, our country's been without anybody steering the ship, and we've got, Mark Carney signing executive orders. Sure, okay, that's how it works. 70 billion so far without parliamentary oversight, but hey, who's counting?
He looked very Trumpian in signing those orders, didn't he?
Oh yeah,
like, he actually looked very Trumpian.
He's got to really work on his his signing so that it looks very Trumpy.
Yes. Okay, so now you get the fall economic update, and normally you're going to get another supplementary estimate B prior to January 1st, okay? And then you get a corresponding supply bill. So there's an estimate and a supply bill, and voting on the supply bill effectively authorizes the spending, okay? And then sometimes there'll be an estimate C in February or March. That's basically, for all intents and purposes, we messed up. We know we're going to come in short, so let's authorize this spending before the end of the year.
We're over budget, folks.
Yeah. So sometimes that one's necessary, and then that's how expenses are actually authorized. So the budget does not authorize the expenses. The budget just is, theoretically, the purpose of the budget is to know, should I actually authorize this spending? Because in absence of the budget, how do I know if this spending is reasonable or not? I don't know how much money is coming in, so how can I decide how much money is going to go out? Right.
Well, they have access to the money printer. They can just put some numbers on the machine and push send, and boom, there's some money there.
That's right. And then, so other than that, there's really only 3 ways that spending is actually authorized. Okay, so you have an estimate. Okay, whether that's a main estimate or a supplementary estimate followed by a supply bill. Okay, that's voted on. Then you have individual items that can be voted on, like when they individually voted on CERB. That was an individual item, basically a piece of legislation and a supply bill all in one. And then you have special warrants, which how we've been authorizing spending now. So those are, pretty much the 3 ways that you can authorize spending. So the special warrants is supposed to be, we have an immediate need and there's really no way to authorize it by an ordinary vote. So, Prime Minister goes to the Governor General and says, here we go. This is what I want to spend the money on. And, the good old king or queen, this representative, signs off on it for us, right?
Yeah.
And that's where we are now. So those special warrants that you talked about, I'll pull them up on the screen here.
Sure.
So we actually have them. So there was 2 of them. So the first one was in April, and it was for 40 billy, right? Remember,
40
we always
billies.
tell people, it's like, if you want to understand the system, you got to get really comfortable with billies and trillies. So
All right.
40 billy in spending, and it goes through and like what they're actually spending the 40 billy on. Okay. Go through, you see some of the larger ones. It's like, man, we're going to spend $6 billion on Indigenous relations, and we're going to spend $1.7 billion on Department of Employment and Social Development.
$6 billion on Indigenous relations and Northern affairs, but they still have no clean drinking water on a number of reserves.
And another $6 billion on Department of Indigenous Services.
Wow.
Okay.
Another $6 billion.
$4 billion on defense. Okay. $1.1 billion Department of Works. My personal favorite on these are the Office of the Parliamentary Budget Officer. They're going to get $1.5 million. No budget, but we're going to give them $1.5 million
All right,
to not deliver a budget.
Perfect.
So
yeah.
that's
$1.5 billion to not deliver a budget.
It's
Got
$1.5 million.
All right.
It's $1.5 million. But they get another $1.5 million on the next one. So they're up to $3 million, still no budget. So I was joking with Trevor saying, it's like, I could deliver no budget for $2 million. Like, I give you a fantastic deal, right? RCMP, it's almost $1 billion. Okay. We have the Treasury Board Secretariat, $1.1 billion. So that's $40 billion. That was the first one. That was the first 40 of the 70. Okay. Then you get number 2, and this is where it kind of came to fruition. It's like the first one almost just like, I don't want to say snuck under the radar, but it didn't make as much noise. It was kind of the second one because it was, just after the new government was elected, and now you get a second special warrant, basically. So kind of arguably spending without any oversight, and this one's for $30 billion. Okay, $30 billion, and similar ones. You get the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation needed $803 million. Interesting, very interesting. I love some explanatory notes on this, but this is the shortfall with these special warrants. It's like you get line items and not really a whole bunch of budget discussion or explanation other than that. Okay, but the CMHC needed $800 million. Interesting.
Wow.
I wonder if there were some defaults there, but Correctional Services of Canada, $513 million. Okay, same thing. Indigenous Relations, $2.2 billion. Department of Employment and Social Development, $5.5 billion. Seems like there might be some EI claims at this point.
Could be, yeah.
Seems like there might be some EI claims.
Because last time we checked, what was unemployment at? 6.9?
6.9. Yep.
Yikes.
So Department of Indigenous Services, $3.3 billion. Department of National Defense, $5.9 billion. Okay. And going all the way down there, $33 billion. So there you go. There's your $73 billion. That's how it's been authorized. 3 ways that you can authorize spending in Canada: with an estimate, and then a supply bill, or with a standalone bill, usually on a standalone issue, or a special warrant.
Special warrant.
Special warrant.
This is an emergency, folks. We have to do this so that all these things can keep going. Yeah.
So that is, we have no functioning budget. They touched on it on that article there, and they said the last time we didn't have a budget was 2020, I believe, in that video we just watched.
That's right.
Which is true. There was no budget for 2020. And some people would say that's a terrible idea and we should have had a budget anyways. I would probably agree. You probably should have a budget anyways. Was it difficult circumstance at that time? I guess so. Difficult circumstances. They did talk about the Paul Martin, I believe, which was in 2002. It was somewhat misleading how that video came off, because they said they didn't have a budget. They actually just delivered it late that year.
Right.
They delivered it late that year. So I was looking back at trying to find the instances to determine the significance of this thing. And it really, 1998 was the only other instance that I could find in any sort of modern history where we didn't have a budget. And it was the same sort of thing where, Chrétien, basically wins the election in and around the budget time, and they skipped the year. Okay. So 2002, it actually did happen. It just happens late, but really in 1998, they skipped it all the way through to 1999.
And before that, I believe it was World War II. We didn't have a budget for like 480 some days.
Probably, yeah, probably. So that's kind of not completely unprecedented, highly unusual. Let's get into how unusual it is, though, because that's the point. It's like, you look at the G7 countries. So the G7 countries: France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the UK, and the US. Okay, and of course Canada. Like these are our peers, so to speak. And one of the reasons will be, well, it's emergency spending because there's tariffs. Like, that's a difficult pill to swallow because like they're all embattled in these tariff wars, right? And every one of the other G7 countries has a budget. Every one of them has a functioning budget that you can access on the government website. Okay. Now, it's not just the G7 countries that have a budget.
Oh, really? Do tell.
It's not just the G7 countries that have a budget. So I'm going to get into some other countries that you may or may not think would have a budget, but do have a budget. Okay. So here's some. Communist China has a budget available on the government website.
Oh,
Communist China. So Mark Carney in Canada, we do not have a budget. Communist China does have a budget publicly available on their website. Okay. Some other countries that do have a budget on their website. Russia. Vladimir Putin, for all his crazy making, he managed to get a budget out there.
wow. That's incredible. In amongst the bombing of Ukraine, he was able to get his government together to put out a budget. That's wonderful.
Yes.
All right.
That would be another example. The Ukraine.
Shocking.
So in terms of levels of emergencies, it's like we're undergoing some tariff. I'm not going to call it a war. It's a negotiation. We're undergoing a tariff negotiation when we can't have a budget. But the Ukraine is fighting a hot war and they have a budget. So.
Interesting,
right? What are, some other examples? Haiti. Haiti has a budget available on their website.
Does Haiti even have a functioning government right now?
I have no idea who posted this budget, but they have a budget. So
didn't they just have a coup and they're run by some kind of warlord at the moment? Is that
apparently the warlords like budgets? So
they got to know how much they got to spend on like blowing hookers and guns and stuff, right?
Crazy. I mean, a few more examples to show you how unusual it is not to have a budget. Sudan, Somalia, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. These are all, whether you like it or not, they're third world countries, embattled in conflicts, and they all have budgets. But it's not my personal favorite.
Oh, what is the personal favorite?
My personal favorite.
Let's do it.
Of dysfunctional countries that are not dysfunctional enough to not have a budget. My personal favorite is the Taliban in Afghanistan have published a budget. So Mark Carney and the Liberals in Canada have not published a budget, but the Taliban in Afghanistan have a functioning budget available publicly on their website. So that's very interesting on showing you the ridiculousness of not having a budget.
Okay? Oh, Canada.
Now,
Canada.
I'll make the balance argument because we learned about this the other day, and I think you were saying, Josh, we don't have a budget. I was like, yeah. My first comment, I think, to you is like, it would be wrong anyways. I mean, last time they missed it by 20 billion. So, like, what difference is it?
Just 20 billion.
That was my first 20-second reaction to it when I found out they didn't have it. I was like, well, last time they thought they were going to be out, short 40 billion. They ended up being short 60 billion. So, how much difference did the budget make anyways?
In comparison to the U.S., that's a rounding error. Like, let's get serious.
That's right. So that was my first reaction to it. But then, you have some time to reflect on it. It's like, I'm a fractional CFO and my job is to kind of step back from the craziness and take the 30,000 foot view and decide, where this business or where this household should take their finances. It's like, let's just say this was my assignment tomorrow. And someone said, like, what the heck do you have to do? It's like, okay, we actually have to take a realistic expectation. It's like, they actually didn't know where the money was going. So if someone comes to me And let's just say they have a March year end.
Sure.
They have a March year end, okay? And I know last March of 2024, they totally flew through their budget. You know, they ended up 60 billion out when they should have been 40 billion out, okay? So they totally flew through their budget by, 50% the deficit was higher. Okay, so I actually know that they took forever to deliver the statement. They were late in filing the statement. I mean, kind of what that tells me is functionally they don't have a functional accounting system. So when I actually go in and look at the records, how much confidence do I have in it? If this was a private company and I know that they're in financial disarray, I'm not going to go and issue a budget or a plan based on interim reporting that I think is wrong. It was wrong last year, right? And and when you drill through that budget, like where did it miss? It basically missed almost $20 billion in what it labeled as a single line item for contingent Indigenous issues, right? Like it was like with no explanation, no real depth of it, even though it was like the most significant line item. It's like, a 50-page document, and basically the entire issue is buried in one line item that didn't really give a lot of explanation. So, I have my doubts on it. So like if this was a private company, like if I'm, trying to play devil's advocate on how crazy this is, it's like I'd actually want to expedite the financial reports before I issue the budget, because I have no idea what my starting point is. So how do I issue a budget when I actually don't know what my starting point is, right? Like that's just what I think. And there's people out there who say, "Oh, that's the federal government. They're experts and everything." Like, no, they're not. They missed it by 20 billion last time. Like, I won't trust that starting position until I see that financial report, right? So if I'm actually being fair, like if I'm actually being like, yeah, I mean, and we look at the order of operations, is those public accounts normally come out before the fall economic update. Normally they do, right? I would actually want to see the public accounts before the fall economic update. Like, I would actually do that. That's the order of operations that I would recommend and do in a private company. But I sure as heck wouldn't wait until September.
Right.
We would expedite that year end. If that year end is March, we would, move heaven and earth to move that year end up. And we're going to not report at the deadline. We're going to report as soon as possible so we can get a real functioning budget in place, right?
Sure. And, why do you want a budget? Well, a budget, gives you guardrails, how much you should be spending, where you should be spending it. And it gives you accountability, because really it is not their money. It is the money of the Canadian people, right? It's not they just don't get to play around with it and stack it up and do whatever they want, but they do. So we've got no guardrails, we've got no training wheels, we've got no repercussions or accountability. So we kind of need a budget. I would recommend having a budget. I mean, if you had your household didn't have a budget and you just gave Sandra the credit card, just go crazy, rack them all up,
knock it out. Yeah.
We don't have a magic money printer to just go ahead and cover off that credit card. Yeah.
We don't, but they do.
We don't, but they do, right? So, I mean, I think it's kind of important to have a budget.
Yeah. And so, it's like, really, what will be the order of operations? Like, yeah, it actually does make sense to get the statement of accounts out first and then publish the budget, because you're basically just acknowledging that the former regime had no idea what they're doing, so you have no idea where you're starting from. But, I mean, like I said, in a private enterprise, if it was a March year end, we'd be trying to do that year end this month. You know what I mean? We'd be trying to do that year end this month so we can have a budget next month. Like, that's what we'd be trying to do. We wouldn't just push out a fake budget where we don't actually know the starting position or what happened last year yet, right? So,
and for me, here's the other thing. Okay, so, all right, the people who are responsible for that government at that time, and who wildly overshot their budget by 20 billies, right? He hired the same people. It's the same group of people just shuffled around. They shuffled the deck a little bit, but it's the same people. Doing the same thing.
Same bureaucrats.
Same ineptitude, same jackassery that's going to be going on for the next who knows how long. And, here we are. So how do we deal with this?
I mean, What are they going to do? So like functionally, how's this going to happen? So they did the $70 billion of special warrants, but you have to understand, you're talking about an organization that has $500 billion in operating expenditures. Okay, so $70 billion is like less than 2 months. Like they have less than 2 months available. So they're going to have to approve some new spending. And theoretically, they could approve spending with supplementary estimates and supply bills. You don't actually need the budget. I mean, it seems logical that you would have an overall plan before you approve spending, but you actually can have an estimate of spending and then approve it, and it would be binding. That is a way to approve spending. Not ideal, but it would work. And they're going to be forced into something. So it's either going to be approving based on one of the supplementary estimates or producing a main estimate and a supply bill, or a supplementary estimate and a vote, because $70 billion is not going to get them through to fall. Like it won't. I mean, it's like I said, it's roughly less than 2 months of operating expenditure.
The other scary words that I saw in this whole discussion about not having a budget, I think it was Champagne who said, yes, just like we had said during the campaign, we're going to spend less so we can invest more. So what that gets interpreted in my mind is they're going to be giving out less in, rebates and checks to, the average Canadian, so that they can invest in these, green infrastructure projects that are going to go nowhere. Like we've got multiple battery plants, EV companies like Honda and so forth who are not building EVs anymore, and we've sunk billions into them as taxpayers. I think it's going to be more of that kind of stuff. So not spending, but investing.
Yes.
That is a lie.
Yes. I mean, borrowing money to invest makes sense, but you have to trust that the person who's actually doing the investing is going to make wise investments and not pet social projects. And so Paul didn't really actually go down that I'm going to borrow money to invest, because the average conservative, their head would explode if they did that. And it sounded new age for the Liberals to vote on it. But that's what we teach people to do all the time. Borrow fake money to invest in real assets that pay a bigger return than you're going to pay in interest. Like that is the name of the game, but I have no confidence that. I think they'll make it worse because they'll borrow money too. So you'll still have the debt, but you won't have the cash flow producing asset, just like the shuttered battery plants, right? Like that's the likely scenario here.
And don't forget the cricket plant that shut down. We invested billions of dollars into edible crickets, and that's shut down.
That'll fire up again once we're locked in our shipping container homes. So don't worry. that thing still probably has a future for when people need to eat their ration bug paste that we've talked about. But that's the so they're like, what's going to happen? It's like, I actually agree with the order of operations. I totally disagree with the timeline. Like it's insane. It's like, but yeah, logically, you actually do need a statement of account before you produce a budget, because the budget would just be it would just be so far off. It would be a fictitious document, right?
Sure.
So totally agree with the order of operations, but the timeline's completely unreasonable. You cannot run a country, for 6 months without a budget. Like that's not a great timeline. But I mean, good luck getting the federal union government employees to work overtime to push out that statement of account early, right? That's a private industry solution that I would think of, right? Like, well, let's just do the year end this month and let's get a plan next month, right?
Yeah, you forget that most of the people who are working for the government are working from home, and and they show up maybe a couple days a week max. Yeah, because since COVID, we can't go to work anymore, so that efficiency has gone out the window. We got 60,000 people who are employed by CRA. They'll find that cup of coffee that you got, you purchased that you shouldn't have. But heck, when it comes to the government of Canada, we're good.
I think you're probably hitting on something, Trevor, that's actually probably more significant than the average person gives credence to, that they just think it's the guy in charge and they just think it's Trudeau. It's like, no, the people who are supposed to be doing this work, the bureaucrats in the background, are actually not going in the office anymore. So, of course, everything is late and wrong. Like, that's actually a likely consequence. It's like, we have our, we got our 20 people who show up to the Edmonton office every day, and we got our 5 people who show up to our offshore offices every day. It's like they show up to our offices. We know exactly what's happening there. Yeah. If we said, hey, just, we'll crank out all these year ends of financial plans and monthly reports, and I'm sure you guys will do it, and you'll just email it in after. It's like it would never get done. Like it would just not in a million years would it happen, right? And the level of coordination on the size of enterprises that we're dealing with, or like kind of. Most of them are 0 to 10 million in revenue, like compared to an organization that's 500 billion in revenue. The amount of coordination you need from team members, and like, oh my goodness, like it's a disaster, right? So I actually think that what you're saying is so much more significant in the scheme of things, and it wouldn't matter who was in charge if the people actually doing the heavy lifting on those projects are just not coming into the office and working from home. It's like the likely result is these reports and these budgets will be late and wrong. Like
every time.
That's pretty much likely. So we know it's we're looking. It's like we understand that there's some reasonings behind it. We understand the mechanisms of the plumbing. There's some reasonings on of how the order of operations are actually reasonable, but the timing is unreasonable because, if the Taliban can get a budget out, we should be able to get a budget out. Like that's right. That's kind of it. Yeah. And so like
follow the example of the Taliban, Canada. Like get a budget.
We're in, just like the thumbnails, like we're in Kim Jong-un territory by not having a budget. There's very few examples on planet Earth of countries that do not have a budget. Whether they're, completely lies and fictitious, that's another story, but at least they have something, right? At least there's something out there, some semblance of reasoning and thought that goes into it before they just start firing up the money printer. So that's it. But here is the falsehood. Is we think, because we live in Canada and we are exposed to the craziness in Canada, that we think this, once we wrap our heads around, like, this is crazy, but we think we're the only country doing crazy things. Just because we're the only ones of the G7 countries that don't have a budget doesn't mean that things are normal, okay? And so I just want to walk people through this because this is where people like lose focus and they get knocked off the path and they're not going to find their spot on the life raft as we talked about it, right? It's like, so let's look at the rest of the G7 countries and specifically,
I forgot to bring my tinfoil hat because this is the tinfoil hat moment, but really it's not. Let's go.
Yeah. I mean, this is like since 2022, and I use January 2022. COVID restrictions were largely gone or rapidly declining at that point. So it's
thank you, truckers.
What happened at that point, right? It was, France. Let's look at France first. In 2022, they start nationalizing their energy, as if we haven't tried to nationalize industries, before. So in 2022, they start nationalizing their energy. In 2023, they start having riots in the streets about their pensions, okay? Because they tried to increase the pensionable age from 62 to 64. Wait till they find out that 64 is not sustainable. But like even Macron knew that 62 was ridiculous, right? But they start rioting in the streets. And what happens in 2024? A snap election, a hung parliament, a prime minister who resigns. Like, just doesn't that sound familiar? Snap election, prime minister resigns, right? Germany, energy crisis in 2022. Okay, then they have Deutsche Bank crashing, the largest bank in Germany. So this would be like RBC, like just stock price falling from the sky, and they basically had to give them sweetheart deals on all their fines because they couldn't afford to pay the fines, and basically come out and make a public statement that say it's too big to fail. We'll back them. There's no way it's going down. And without that, Deutsche Bank's done. Right? That's the largest. Germany is a much larger economy than Canada. Having their biggest bank fail, which is like basically a global entity. They start having in 2023 manufacturing declines. Significant manufacturing declines, and Germany still does some manufacturing. Okay, they have the coalition government in 2024 falls. Snap election 2024.
Wild.
Noticing a pattern: government falls, snap election. Okay, Italy, they start getting ridiculously high debt to GDP. Not quite Japan levels, but getting there. Okay, again, 2022, failed government. Snap election. Failed government, snap election. And all the countries, all of them, in and around 2022, you get peak inflation and stock markets declining. That's what's happening in 2022 largely, is you're getting that peak inflation, even the government fake inflation, the one that's designed for
2%.
The G-rated inflation that they want you to believe, right?
Yeah.
Even that's showing that it's bad. And then what happens in 2024? They have energy crisis, right? Well, that's happening. Japan, I mean, they're the poster child for the debt to GDP, right? They're the
highest.
Canary in the coal mine,
Yeah.
right? And what happens in 2022? They get a former prime minister who was assassinated while giving a political speech. Former prime minister, like, we've seen assassination attempts in the U.S. too. Like, this is not that new. And then you have the LDP coalition government. They held a majority since 2009. In 2029, they lost their majority. So they had held a majority. That coalition had held a majority since 2009, and then they lost their majority. And they lost their majority in 2024 with an election that had one of the lowest voter turnouts in history. So basically, there was a regime change, and the people were so apathetic. They were so disinterested. They thought it meant they had so given up on the situation they didn't even show up to vote.
Yeah, they've given up on the democracy of the situation and just decided to not go out and vote. And that's, kind of what happened in this election here. The largest party that didn't vote, 36 or 37%, eligible voters did not vote because it's rigged. Not voting our way out of this, folks.
And then you get, like, what happens in 2024? You have a stock market, the Japanese stock market crashed 12.4% in 1 day. 1 day, largest single decrease since 1987. Like, 1 day, okay? You move on to the UK. You move on to the UK, and you have 2022, you have Boris Johnson resigning. You have, Liz Truss coming in for 49 days.
49 days,
49
folks.
days, blowing up the government bond market and then getting replaced in 49 days. Like, so not having a budget is crazy, but crazy. You just go down the list. Crazy. All the G7 countries, and all of them in isolation look like, they have to look like to the people in those countries that are just like, this is my country. It's gone mad. Surely every other country is better. That's where they're missing. It's like even the U.S. It's like in the U.S. in 2022, you have Silicon Bank. You have Silicon. Well, that's in 2023 actually, but in 2022 you got big box stores. Big box stores going bankrupt all over the place. You're getting like Bed Bath & Beyond and JCPenney, and it's like they're gone. Like these big names that you heard about for years, just gone, right? 2023, bank failure. Silicon Bank, right?
Yeah.
Gone.
Yeah.
Just
huge.
Like gone. Completely failed, okay? And then what do you have? You have in 2024, you have Biden resigning in the middle of the night on a document that everyone, questions the legitimacy of it, right? Was it actually real, right? And so because of the two-party system in the U.S., they don't have a snap election, but like it's the same level of craziness,
Yeah.
So I mean, he doesn't really resign; he's just not running, right? But kind of a de facto takeover, and then you have this year, Trump, tariffing penguins. Countries that are occupied by penguins, and misrepresenting trade deficits as tariff rates, right?
Yeah.
Crazy. And we've talked about the strategic benefit in the past on that, and like what they were actually trying to accomplish. So if you want to go back, you can watch that video. Won't go too much into it. It's like, and what do you have in every one of these countries? In every single one of these countries, you have massive immigration expansion or contractions and change, just complete reversals in the policies, or even deportations, or just like throwing their hands up in the air like Japan saying, well, we're going to have a declining population, nothing we can do. Like, it's the same story on all of them because it's the lever, right? And so here is the point where it's like, it's going to feel when you're in this echo chamber of your country that it's going to feel like not having a budget is crazy. And you're right. Not having a budget is completely insane. But when you start comparing it to the level of crazy and everything else, you're going to come to the conclusion, if you objectively stand back, you're going to come to the conclusion that the level of craziness in all the developed Western world is just increasing. and increasing and increasing. Like all of that stuff is different, but equally crazy, like equally nuts. And what is the reason? Like, what is the reason? It's like we've talked about it in the boot
I
camp.
think it's the money.
It
The
is
money is broken.
It is the money.
And because the money is broken, they need to have all these distractions to keep you occupied because they know the system is busted. Sorry, I broke in on you, but
Yeah, I mean that's it, Trevor. Like that is it. Like we are in year 54 of a failed field experiment. We are at the beginning stages of the failure, and so you either have problems that are directly related, like directly economically related to that, like missing budgets, blowing up bond markets, banks failing, like the whole bit, or almost decisions that are designed to be divisive. Like, they're not, I mean, they are divisive. They're designed to be radical because they're basically just a distraction, because the politicians implementing the divisive policies, it's like without those divisive policies, people might actually see that they're actually less and less relevant than you think they are.
yeah, exactly. I think they are irrelevant for the most part because look, we haven't had a functioning parliament for I don't know, a long time in Canada. It's been like, dang, I don't know, like
months.
6-8 months. Yeah. It's been a while.
Yeah.
And, country's still going. We haven't blown up. We haven't, nothing terrible has really happened besides, getting another liberal government. But I think it's the banks. It's the people who control the money who are in charge, who are the ones who are really in charge and the ones really in charge of making these decisions and all of these things that are happening currently to bring the destabilization because it will eventually drive up the asset prices.
Yes.
Right?
So this is what we are. We're in the beginning stages of the failure of the monetary system. This is a direct result of, like, all of these things are a result of, central banking and increasing the money supply in conjunction with the commercial fractional reserve banking system that also increases the money supply exponentially based on that. So, like, here's where we are. And so these craziness are designed, like, they're likely to cause a lot of people to shake off the path. But the path is actually very clear, is you have to trade the fake money to buy real assets. And the crazier it gets, it's not the reason to pull back from that. It's actually the reason to suggest it's like, the money printing will expand because that will be the lever that they pull. It's like they have the two levers to pull. It's like they increase the population rates in and out because they know the Ponzi needs more people coming in than out in order for it to work, or they increase the money supply. Like, that really is the two levers at the end of the day, and we know what they're going to do with them. The crazier it gets, the more they will increase the money supply to combat it. And so the more the strategy of buying actual assets are actually going to work, right? And that's why the last boot camp was such a success, and the next one is going to be so important for the people out there. Like 40 out of roughly 1/3 of our tickets are already sold. It's in November. No, I'm not coming to whatever city you're located in. I'm not, because people flew from every province in Canada. Like we've had attendees from every single province in Canada. Where the first one guy flew from Newfoundland this time to attend. Right? We've had PEI, we've had New Brunswick, we have Manitoba, we have lots from BC because we've got an office out there. We know the serious people are going to get out there, and the solutions we're going to present, because a lot of people, they're just wondering, is like, well, what assets do I need to get? And what if I don't have any cash to get those assets? How do I get this so-called fake money to buy these real assets? We teach the strategy. It's actually, it's very predictable, right? And the more the craziness happens, I'm not saying it's like, no, I don't want any Canadian assets. I want cash, and I'm going to leave to one of these other crazy countries. Or, you get clients who's like, I'm going to move to Costa Rica and everything's going to be awesome. It's like, great. Like, what's the GDP per capita in Costa Rica? Who are you going to sell to there? You know what I mean? Like, it's just that's not, like, they're just going to get rattled by the shiny object syndrome. And it's like, it's very, very clear of what's happening here. And the solutions are very clear. But the problem is, like, you have to come to the realization that the Titanic has already struck the iceberg. You can't stop that. At this point, it's just a question of who gets on the life raft. And not everyone can get on the life raft. And that's, like, a very sobering part that you have to come to the realization. Is like, you're not voting your way out of it. You're not going to separate your way out of it. It's like, because you think they're not even talking about this. The people you're hoping to save, you don't even really talk about it. It's like, when was the last time someone actually talked about the money supply? I saw like Scheer debating someone on CBC, but none of them could actually say what the M2 money supply was. They were both arguing about it, but no one even knew what it was, right? So here, this is the path. And the craziness is designed to give you the resolve. Like, it shouldn't knock you off your path. It should give you more resolve to stay on that path, because it's very clear. It's like you look at these instances of craziness, and they're not just accelerating in your country, they're accelerating in all the Western countries. And then you cannot stay on the Titanic because it has nice, it has nice tiles and tables in the ballroom. You need to get off of that thing onto the life raft, because there's going to be a certain amount of people who get off of that. So
okay, so now just to boil it down, because I know people are probably wondering, what is the life raft? What the heck? What do we do here, Josh? What is the life raft?
I mean, the
Explain
life raft
it to people.
The system is designed to move the money from the people who do the work to the people who know how to borrow smartly to invest. That is how the system is designed. And as it fails, it will expedite that process. It won't slow it down. It's not going to increase your wages in real terms. It's going to expedite, the gap between the rich and the poor, the middle class, just like we pointed out last week with what the government of Canada's vision is for 2040. The middle class will be slowly knocked down and obliterated, and the wealth accumulation of the top 20% are going to increase. And it's basically, you have to get yourself into the position where the inflationary pressures, the expansion of the money supply starts to work in your favor rather than against you. Because as a wage earner, it works against you. As a pension holder holding bonds, it works against you. Okay, you have to get yourself in a position where the expansion of the money supply is actually it actually increases your wealth, not decreases it, right? And the urgency is clear. It should be. When you see a country without a budget, when you know it's just you and North Korea, and the Taliban manage a budget, it's like, now you need a plan. Right, you need a plan, and that's what this podcast is designed for. That's what the business bootcamp is designed for. That's what we've been helping our clients with for years now. So,
all right.
So I hope that's helpful for somebody. And next week I'll be in the Vancouver office. So, we'll see if there's any craziness that happens between then and there, or what we're going to talk about next week. But
yeah. I think the craziness is guaranteed. It's baked into the cake.
Yeah. It's like we never know. What are they going to do this week? What are we going to have to talk about? It's like we almost don't know by Friday, because when we make a plan, they do something that's so crazy, we have to talk about that instead. So,
right.
But we'll keep doing our best to bring these issues to you guys. We really appreciate you tuning in. Hit the like and subscribe button so maybe a few more people can get on that life raft, and hope to see you next week, guys.
All right.